Hello, I am glad to be with you. I am excited about all the things that have been happening lately in the wacky world of Watchtower. Before I get into my topic, I have to say there has been some interesting backlash lately on governing body member Anthony Morris III's talk for his zone visit. They plastered some of the things he said all over the internet because this nut, this puritanical fundamentalist nut that is leading the Jehovah's Witness movement, one of the leaders of it, came out and reiterated the fact that tight pants on men are gay, that the homosexuals love it. He also went on to say that the Jehovah's Witness women should not be wearing tight Spanx when they exercise. I think he really just means, workout clothes, right? I mean, if you go to any gym, pretty much anywhere in the world, you're going to see women working out in tight, shorts or stretch pants that are made for exercise. It's really pretty commonplace. Next thing he's going to say is that we're going to need to go back to the bathing costumes of the 1900s with the long, loose-fitting bathing costumes that they used to wear when they went swimming. So Anthony Morris, and what's funny is as he's giving this ridiculous, outdated 1950s, diatribe, you can hear titters, guffaws, laughs, chuckles. People in the audience, and these are not apostles, these are witnesses in the audience, are actually trying to contain themselves because it was so absurd. So it's been all over the internet. Some mainstream sources have picked it up as well, with headlines like Jehovah's Witness leader condemns tight pants as homosexual, etc., etc. So here we have one of the leaders of a group that is 7 or 8 million strong, speaking like he's from the Dark Ages. So we've been talking about what it was like for me personally to be an elder, me, Eric Struggler, and I did part one thinking that it would just be a short video, and then it turned out to be I only told the first experience I ever had sitting on a judicial committee, and it ended up taking up, all my time. So I'm going to do part two, and I've had a number of questions. People have wondered, what happened to the young man that got disfellowshipped? I believe he was probably 18. He might have been 19. He couldn't have been much older than that at the time. Lived at home with his mother, the two of them. His father was not in the picture. And I can tell you this, that he moved a few hours away to a larger city, got a job, actually started his own business, and he never tried to become a Jehovah's Witness again. And within a few months of his disfellowshipping, I remember going up to his mother, sweet lady, I'm sure she still is a sweet lady, and I asked her, how's your son doing? And she says, first thing she says is, I really appreciate you asking, because no one asks about him anymore. No one asks me anything about him, and I understand why, but it's still hard. And I nodded my head and I sympathized with her, pretending as if I really knew what it was like. But of course I didn't. But I still, I cared about her, and I cared about her son, because I still didn't think he should have been disfellowshipped anyway. He smoked a marijuana cigarette in his backyard. So she said, he's a good boy. Eric, he's a good boy. He comes and visits me. He helped me fix my broken door, and we visited. We had a nice visit, and then he went back home again. And she said that he's done that a couple of times. Now, that was, like I say, maybe a few months, maybe 6 months after he was disfellowshipped. About 3 or 4 years later, I asked again how he was doing, and she reiterated almost the same thing, that he was a good boy, he was a good son, and she wishes he would come back to the twoof, but he was a good kid. So I would like to think that ultimately those elders did him a favor by freeing his mind, or at least freeing his body religiously to get out of the Kingdom Hall and not go back. We know that most of the people that stay away from the hall for a while, the indoctrination wears off. They start to think clearly. They start to think like regular people. Common sense starts to prevail. The cult mindset begins to lift. Hopefully he did research on the internet, things like this. Because the one thing that is sad is there's hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of disfellowshipped former Jehovah's Witnesses that have not learned tat yet, that have not freed their mind from the ignorance and the fundamentalism and educated themselves and come to realize that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania has one thing on its mind: money, its brand, and the bottom line. And every customer that they have occupying a space in the Kingdom Hall is their only goal. Customers. Keeping their customers, getting new customers, and spreading their brand in those little squares with jw.org on them. Okay, so a few months later, I ended up on another judicial committee. And this was a lady that had not been to the meetings for some time. You know, I think maybe it had been a year or two since she had been to the Kingdom Hall, at least when I had been there. I didn't know her. And here I was, you know, a young elder, and I pretty much knew everybody that was a regular attender. So she used to be associated with Porterville, Mountain View congregation. That's where I was at the time. And my fine former father-in-law, Bob, was the chairman. Mr. Bob, he had been an elder, I don't know, 25 years at that point, 30 years at that point, whatever. Mr. Experience. And then myself, and I think I might have been Ronnie again. I don't really remember on the third person at this juncture. But so the three of us go and we meet with her, and she broke down. She cried. She explained that she had dated a worldly man at work and that they had slept together. She told us that. And then the chairman, Bob, asks, well, did you use protection? And she said, you know, kind of embarrassed, but she says, yeah, you know, he used protection. So we hadn't really talked to her that long or asked her, I didn't think, that many questions, but, you know, I was new at this. And then he says, well, we're going to let you step outside now, and we're going to discuss some things, and we'll call you back in. So the first thing I thought in my mind was, well, we didn't talk to her for very long, but, you know, okay. I don't know, might have been 20 minutes, 30 minutes, which, believe me, for a judicial, that's not very long to talk to somebody before you dismiss them. So, first thing out of his mouth, out of Bob's mouth, well, we're probably going to have to disfellowship her. And again, I'm thinking, aren't we supposed to, like, reflect and look at the book and pray and then each share our thoughts before we jump straight to what we're going to decide? So I just said, well, how come? And he says, they use protection. They use protection, and if they use protection, then that's pretty much usually a done deal, because that's premeditated, and to stop and do that, well, that's pretty much it. So the conversation went around, went back and forth, and then we did go to the book, and we did look up scriptures, but that was pretty much it. He was the senior elder, and according to his philosophy, belief system, whatever, that was it. She was liable for Gehenna, or at least for, the first death and being disfellowshipped, if not the second death. And I want to dissuade those of you that are watching that have heard or that think that, if a person's repentant, they won't be disfellowshipped. Have you ever heard that? Witnesses love to spout that. I had, my ex-wife, for one, say the first thing, we're talking about disfellowshipping, and I was saying that I thought that it was wrong, and shunning was wrong, and of course this was after I had stepped down and had stopped going to meetings and, didn't want to be associated anymore. First thing out of her mouth is, disfellowshipping is a loving arrangement. And then the second thing, as if to follow it up with the little love bomb on top of the disfellowship bomb. But if someone is truly repentant, they won't be disfellowshipped anyway. To which I laughed out loud when she said that. So I can dissuade you of this right now. Whether a person is repentant or not, sometimes has a bearing on whether they will be disfellowshipped. Oftentimes it does not. Elders are into quantity. How many times did you meet with this person and date him? How many times did you commit fornication? Or as Bob likes to say, relations. He couldn't say it normally. He'd say, how many times did you commit the relations? Anyways, that's the way it works. If it's too many times, you're out. In some elders' minds, if it's just, I screwed up and we had sex and we fooled around, 5 times. I was on a bunch of disfellowshippings for fooling around. And if it was 3, 5, even 10 times that you did the deed, you might get out of it. You might, you're shedding tears. I've seen young men, older men shed tears. Ladies. The tears don't really mean a whole lot to some of these guys. And the Elder's book itself says you can't just look at tears. The Shepherd book says don't be easily swayed by tears. So I remember one guy, he couldn't even count how many times, that he'd been fooling around because it'd been going for a couple of months or whatever. Well, that was it. Automatic. And that guy bawled. That guy was so sad. And it turns out, well, you know what? That's for another story. I should probably just save that one. But, history of abuse, history of mental illness, being beat up by your parents, molested by your uncle, whatever. Those things, you'll get some sympathy, but at least the judicials I was in, that wasn't really a factor as far as, are we going to DF this person? I remember bringing it up one time. Well, yeah, but they said they were abused, and, well, they still did it, 27 and a half times, and, so in this lady's case, that was it. She was disfellowshipped because they had used protection. And she had protected herself from, getting a venereal disease or pregnant or whatever. So that was the second judicial committee that I sat on. And you know what I can say as a young elder, as a new elder, it did not, it was discouraging to me but yet I felt like I was doing God's work. I was on the front lines of cleansing the congregation. If it was up to me, she probably wouldn't have got DF'd either. But I went along. I guess I see a pattern developing here. I just went along with the older man, with Bob, the probably one of the meanest elders and the strictest elders I've ever, worked with in the body. And he happened to be my father-in-law, which is another story in itself. I may delve into more of that at some point. So that was the second time. There was lots and lots of times where we met with people because they had fooled around, but it wasn't actually sex, quote unquote. It wasn't intercourse, or it wasn't oral. And so then you had to get into all the details. In fact, maybe I'll talk about that next time. All the many details, the many salacious details that some elders like to get into, and that from some elders, from their point of view, sometimes they feel like they have to ask all these questions. And I think I'll get into that next. I really appreciate, the good response that I've had lately to my videos, also to my Vimeo channel. People are joining Vimeo right and left, and I'm humbled by it. Thank you. I've had some fantastic texts, phone conversations, with just some great people that have escaped, that have freed their mind. These numbers are not going down. They're going up. I've been doing this almost about 4 years now. I've been telling my story and, speaking out against Watchtower abuses, what it's like to be a former clergyman of the Jehovah's Witness movement, is just one more way to help educate people. Hopefully some active witnesses are watching these, but I'm not really that concerned about active witnesses, because if they don't have an itch, I'm not going to try to scratch it for them. If they have an itch and they seek me out, I'll speak to them happily. But if they don't want to talk to me about the truth about the truth, I can't penetrate the Jehovah Witness armor, a frontal attack. It just can't. It almost never works. So my goal is to speak to you, find folks that have left the Watchtower or have been associated with someone that has been or is in the Watchtower. And for those of us that have awakened and we just want to sort it out, we want more information. We want to know more about, what happened to us. We want to know more about this weird movement that we were a part of. And I'm glad to be able to give a few pieces of that puzzle to those of you that enjoy this stuff. So I want you to have a great day. I want you to be good to yourself. And don't forget to reach out to people, message them, text them, call them. And now I need to take my own advice and catch up with all the different people I've gotten to know across the world, across the country. So thank you, strugglers. I'll see you next time.
The order is rapidly fading, for the times they are a-changing.